On my wedding my family blocked me from the group chat. Then I found their vacation photos in Hawaii captioned the family's finally whole. I sent a single message, enjoy it while it lasts. That day I pulled my name from the family business, froze the payroll account. A week later the Internal Revenue Service called my dad. That evening he knocked on my door for 20 minutes. I opened it and then. What caught me off guard wasn't just that they didn't show up, it was that they chose that exact moment on my wedding day to block me from the family group chat. I remember standing outside the venue just after the ceremony. The sun was setting, the sky had that soft golden tint and everyone was headed into the reception hall. Emma was with her bridesmaids laughing about how her veil kept catching wind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I assumed it was another congratulations message, but when I looked it said, "You have been removed from Smith Family Corps." No warning, no context, just gone. I stared at the screen like it was written in another language. My first instinct was to assume it was a mistake. Maybe Caleb tapped something by accident. Maybe Dad got confused and was trying to mute notifications or change the group photo. We've had that group chat for 8 years, holidays, birthdays, updates on the family business, everything went through it. But when I tried to open it, nothing. I was locked out and that's when I started noticing they weren't there. No seats filled at their table. Their 4 chairs were perfectly lined up, Mom, Dad, Mark and Caleb, all empty. The wait staff kept checking if they were late. My best friend, Alan, leaned over and asked if they were stuck in traffic. I just shrugged. I didn't want to ruin the evening. What made it worse was that they had RSVP'd not just once. They had responded to the online form, confirmed again via text a month before, and even talked about what they were wearing. My mom made a whole thing about not wanting to clash with the bridesmaids. Mark asked if his girlfriend could come and I said yes, they weren't just expected, they were part of the damn plan. The photographer kept asking if we wanted to wait for them before doing family photos. I kept putting it off. Then, eventually, we just didn't include them, and Jody whispered during dinner and asked if something had happened between us. I told her I didn't know, and that was the truth. It wasn't until the 3rd day of our honeymoon that I got an answer. We were in Napa just doing a few tastings before heading to our cabin rental. Emma was picking out a boba when I opened Instagram, just out of habit, and there they were standing on a beach in Maui, all 4 of them in matching floral prints, holding cocktails, sunburnt and smiling. Mark even had his arm around Dad, who never does photos. The caption read, "The family's finally whole." I just sat there. No emotion, no outburst, just empty. Emma saw it too. She didn't say anything at first, just put her hand on mine. I told her I needed to send one thing. I opened WhatsApp from her phone. She was still in the group and tied to a single message, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Then I opened my laptop. Smith & Rowe Logistics wasn't just my dad's company. I'd spent the last 6 years turning it into something real. We were co-owners, but I was the one who got us online, landed the Walmart contract, automated half the logistics. I'd set up the dual signature protocol for transactions over $10,000. He didn't even know how to use it. I logged in and removed my name from the business registration, transferred my shares into a holding pattern that froze them and, most importantly, I froze the payroll account. No withdrawals without my sign-off, payroll was due that Friday. I flew under the radar, didn't say anything. Let the silence speak for itself. A week later I got a call from an unknown number. Didn't answer voicemail from Dad's CPA. Apparently, the IRS had flagged some discrepancies, missing documentation, unpaid state tax from 2 years back and, the funny part, without me they couldn't produce half the financial records they needed. That evening I heard the knocking before I even reached the front door. 20 minutes non-stop. I didn't answer right away. I made him wait. When I opened the door he was standing there red-faced and sweating, like he'd sprinted through hell, and the first thing he said, "What did you do?" I let the silence hang there for a few seconds. He was expecting me to flinch, to defend myself, maybe even apologize. I just leaned on the doorframe and waited. He stepped forward like he was about to walk in. I didn't move. "You froze the damn payroll. Do you know what you've done?" I nodded, "Yeah, I know exactly what I've done." He kept talking like that meant he'd get somewhere, said the drivers were threatening to walk. The warehouse crew already had that. 2 clients were demanding penalties for missed deadlines. Said the accountant couldn't even file because my credentials were tied to the online reporting. Then he dropped the one thing he thought would shake me. "The IRS called this morning. They're reviewing 5 years of returns, 5. They think we've been hiding income. If you don't fix this, we're all going down." All that word hit different, "we're all going down." I reminded him that all didn't include the one guy they kicked out of the family chat on his wedding day. That all apparently meant everyone who could make it to Hawaii and smile for the camera while pretending I didn't exist. He tried to say it wasn't personal, that it was just a bad time and they needed space. You needed space for my wedding. That shut him up for a second. He shifted to anger real fast, said I was being petty, acting like a child, throwing away everything we built. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. He weighed it once then tossed it on the floor between us. It was a copy of a document I signed 3 years ago, something buried in the early partnership filings, a clause I'd forgotten. It gave him some partial rights to override financial freezes under specific conditions, but those conditions required proof of negligence or intentional harm. He was going to try and say I sabotaged the company, that I acted with malice. He was bluffing. But it was enough to make the next few days interesting. By Monday his lawyer had sent a cease and desist. By Tuesday I'd replied through mine with a detailed audit of every financial decision I'd made since joining, including the ones I flagged over the years, several of which bordered on tax fraud and all of which I had screenshots of. I didn't tell Emma most of it. She knew the outline, but I kept the stress off her. We'd just gotten back from the honeymoon and I wanted her to have at least a few days of peace before my family's mess leaked into our new life. On Wednesday Mom texted for the first time in 2 months. Can we please talk? This is getting out of hand. No apology, no explanation, just a soft little olive branch thrown like a used tissue. I didn't respond. But by Thursday the game changed, because that's when the CPA started calling me directly, quietly said, the IRS wasn't just looking into the business, they were looking into Dad's personal finances, offshore accounts, a fake vendor, something tied to Caleb. The IRS wasn't just sniffing around, they were hunting. And I hadn't even lifted a finger yet. The call came while Emma and I were finishing up lunch. We'd been sorting out thank you notes at the dining table and, for the first time since the wedding, it felt like things were beginning to settle. We were joking about whose handwriting was worse when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I stepped away and answered. It was Richard, the family business's CPA, a guy I'd spoken to maybe twice in 6 years and never directly, unless something was wrong. He didn't waste time. David, listen, I know you're not involved anymore, but you need to be aware of what's happening. His voice was clicked sharp. I didn't even ask how he got my number, I just listened. Turns out, when I froze the payroll account, it did more than bounce a few paychecks. It disrupted a transaction that was mid-transfer, one flagged for an audit by the bank's compliance team. The account was under a shell vendor, supposedly providing fleet software maintenance, but that vendor didn't exist. The address was a mailbox store in Nevada and the name on the vendor's founding documents Caleb. That's when things started clicking together, why Caleb was always so casually involved in the business, why he never had to explain what he actually did. I asked Richard how bad it was. He paused then said the IRS had now escalated it to a criminal investigator. They weren't just looking at one transaction, they were digging into the last 5 years. Apparently, my withdrawal had exposed a chain of inconsistencies, phony invoices, inflated contracts, undeclared foreign income, and my father had used my digital signature on several documents I hadn't even seen. I hung up and sat with it for a while. I could have walked away right there, watched them burn. But I still had control over the backup server, the one I set up for full financial transparency. Every email, contract, invoice and approval was stored there, and without my password no one could access it. I didn't even have to delete anything, just locked the system remotely. Emma saw me working and asked if something was wrong. I told her we were past the point of fixing it now. Later that evening I got a text from Jody. Your dad's in a spiral, said the IRS called again. Caleb hasn't slept, your mom's freaking out. It didn't feel satisfying, not yet. It just felt inevitable. Then around 9 p.m. I heard a knock. I knew it was him. Before I even looked, Dad stood there, same suit from last week. Hair disheveled, like he'd run his hands through it all day. He didn't wait for me to invite him in, just shoved a thick envelope into my chest. Read it. You're not innocent in all this either. I stayed at the door and opened it slowly. Inside were printed emails, snippets of messages, between me and a logistics client from 2 years ago. My name was on the approval line of a large shipment contract, but I remembered that deal. I signed off on a standard delivery quote. He was the one who modified the invoice later to inflate the delivery cost and hide extra funds. He leaned in and said, if the IRS sees those emails out of context, they won't just come after him, they'll come after me too. He thought that would scare me, that I'd drop everything, log back in, unfreeze the accounts and help them fix the mess. I didn't even blink. Good luck with that. I said you altered those numbers, not me. His tone shifted. He tried appealing to me, then said if I came back now we could clean it up together. Said it's still a family business, that they made a mistake missing the wedding, but we can move past that. That was the first time he even mentioned it, and he thought that would be enough, that one vague mention of abandoning me on the most important day of my life would somehow make this all okay. I just shook my head. You burned that bridge. Now you're mad. The fire's spreading. He stood there for a second longer like he was about to say something else. Then he turned and walked down the driveway. I shut the door and locked it, not for safety, just to make a point. The next morning I got an email from our former legal counsel. Apparently, my dad was trying to offload shares of the company to a third party in a panic sale to raise liquid cash, but he couldn't. My name was still tied to every major asset, and now so was the investigation. I expected fallout, angry texts, threats, maybe even a desperate voicemail from my mom trying to patch things up. What I didn't expect was to hear from someone who hadn't spoken to me in over a decade. Friday morning I got an email from a name I hadn't seen since high school, Uncle Grant. My dad's a strange younger brother. He'd been pushed out of the business back when I was still in college. The story I was always told was that he mismanaged funds and caused problems with the board. His email was short. I heard what's happening. I was waiting for someone to finally see it. If you want the whole picture, meet me. I have everything. I didn't reply at first. I didn't even know what to make of it. Emma urged me to go, said maybe it would help at the very least to understand what I was really up against. So I met him at a diner 2 towns over. He looked older than I remembered, but he didn't seem bitter, just tired. He slid a manila folder across the table before our coffees even arrived. Inside were copies of old bank transfers, emails, and one particular document that made my stomach turn. It was a buyout agreement dated 8 years ago, with my dad's signature and Uncle Grant's. The reason for the buyout? Not mismanagement, not failure, but silence. Apparently, Uncle Grant had discovered that Dad and Caleb had been funneling extra revenue from warehouse leases into a side business, a private shell under Mom's name, that bought and flipped commercial trucks at inflated prices, mostly to our own company. It was a full-circle scam, bleeding the business dry while lining their personal accounts. When Grant found out, Dad offered him a payout on one condition: he'd vanish and never speak about it again. He took the deal but kept the paperwork, just in case. Now, with the IRS circling and the walls closing in, he figured it was time someone else knew. I took everything, scanned it, backed it up twice, then I thanked him and left. The next day the legal team for Smith and Rose sent me a request to urgently attend a mediation call. They were hoping to settle everything quickly, quietly, offer me a full buyout of my shares in exchange for releasing access to the locked accounts and servers. I ignored the message. That same afternoon Emma came home with news of her own. While shopping downtown she ran into one of the warehouse workers, Diego, a guy who'd been with the company since I joined. He told her something strange. Apparently, my dad had told the employees that I was the reason no one was getting paid, that I'd sabotaged the system. After a fight with my brothers he was trying to turn them against me, said I was bitter and unstable. I didn't even get mad, I just laughed, because by Sunday something happened that none of them expected. The IRS didn't just freeze the business accounts, they froze the personal ones too, my dad's, my mom's and Caleb's, all pending formal investigation. No access, no transfers, no warnings. Emma and I were having dinner when I got the alert. All 3 of them were on a list of financial holds issued as part of the wider fraud probe. They were locked out of their money, everything. I set my fork down, leaned back and smiled. The house of cards wasn't just falling now, it had collapsed. Monday morning I woke up to 33 missed calls, 9 from Dad, 10 from Mom, the rest split between Mark and Caleb. Not a single voicemail, just silent panic. By noon I'd received 2 emails from the IRS requesting copies of the backup financial records, specifically the archived correspondence contracts and vendor activity that only I could access. I didn't respond yet I wanted them to sweat. That evening I got an unexpected knock. Emma checked the peephole. First. It was my mother. I hadn't seen her since Christmas 2 years ago. She always preferred to play the quiet partner in family disasters, passive, smiling, never directly responsible. But this time she was the one standing on our doorstep gripping her purse like it was the last stable thing in her life. She asked to come in. Emma left the room. We sat in silence for a few seconds and then she launched into a rehearsed apology. She said she didn't know the full story, that she never agreed to skip the wedding, that Dad had convinced her it would be less tense if they just went away for the weekend. She insisted she tried to call. I told her she could have tried harder, told her I'd seen the group photo, the one with the caption about the family finally being whole. She shifted gears fast, said they were in trouble, that the IRS freeze meant they couldn't pay their mortgage, their credit cards, even their groceries. She said Dad was falling apart, that Caleb had a breakdown and that if I didn't help, everything we built, all the years we spent building the company would be destroyed. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "We know about the emergency fund." I froze. That was something Emma and I had set up years ago, a separate investment account under my name, tied to a trust, not even part of the business. We kept it off the books. Only a few people knew it existed. "How?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your father may have pulled some bank records from back when you two had joint authorization. He thinks that money should go back into the business. You wouldn't have had it if it weren't for the company." She said it like it was logical, like she believed it. I stood up. "I don't care what he thinks, that money is ours. You people left me on my wedding day. I owe you nothing." She begged, literally said the words please. And then she tried one last card. "If you don't help, your father will go public. Say you doctored the books, that you orchestrated this." I laughed. She flinched. They were cornered drowning and now they wanted to drag me down with them. I told her I had no intention of stopping the investigation, that the only reason I hadn't already sent the full archive to the IRS was because I was waiting to see how far they were willing to fall. She stood there for a moment stunned, then left without another word. The next morning I submitted everything, the emails, the backup files, the transaction logs, Uncle Grant's documents, and then I closed the laptop and took Emma out for brunch. Let them burn. 3 days after I submitted the archive to the IRS, the investigation became official. Emma was the one who told me it hit the news. Family-owned freight company under federal audit for multi-year tax evasion. They didn't name names, but anyone local who knew the Smiths could do the math. Friends started texting. A few old coworkers reached out, some in shock, some just to say they always knew something was off. That night I got the final message I'd ever read from my father. It was a screenshot of a legal letter drafted by his attorney accusing me of breaching a fiduciary duty, damaging the company and putting the entire family under emotional and financial duress. He was threatening a civil lawsuit unless I withdrew the documents. I blocked the number, no hesitation. Then I logged into the company portal, one of the few things still left active, and I deleted my profile, my name, my email, everything. Not as revenge, not out of spite, just because it was time. Mark tried to call. A few hours later he left a voicemail, this time said I'd gone too far, said I should have handled this inside the family. Caleb emailed me a paragraph saying I had misinterpreted the situation and we could have had a conversation. Funny, no one wanted a conversation on my wedding day. Not a single one of them showed up, not one message. But now, when their accounts were frozen and their house was under audit, they found their voices. I didn't reply. They all made their choices. I cut contact completely. I didn't block them out of spite, I just didn't want any more of their poison bleeding into what I built with Emma. We moved 3 months later out of state. New town, clean start. The emergency fund stayed untouched. I started consulting again privately. Emma went back to teaching, our life became quiet, stable, real, and Jody and a few other relatives stayed in touch. Some friends from the wedding would still bring it up when we met for dinner, how no one could believe what my family did, how low it was to choose a vacation over their own son's wedding. Everyone agreed on the same thing, that people like that only care about control and when they lose it they lose everything. It's been nearly a year now. Every so often I still get a spammy-looking letter from a law firm or a distant cousin reaching out just to catch up. I ignore them. Emma and I have a new home, a new rhythm. We talk about kids now. We travel when we want to. We laugh a lot more than I ever thought was possible. I'm not angry anymore, just done. Sometimes, when people ask if I miss them, I tell the truth. I miss the version of them I thought they were, but that version never showed up, not when it mattered. And now either will I. The update. 6 days after I thought it was all behind me, I got an email that made me stop cold. It was from the IRS. Not a notice, not a request, a thank you. One of the senior agents on the case had sent a formal statement acknowledging the value of the information I provided. I wasn't expecting it. It said the backup records I submitted had led to the discovery of multiple offshore accounts tied to fraudulent vendor payments, and not just under my dad's name. There were others, associates, a couple of names I recognized from business meetings years ago. 2 of them had already fled the country. But the email ended with something unexpected. We will be issuing a subpoena for testimony based on the records. We believe you were unaware of these activities, but your cooperation may assist in building the broader case. I reread that line twice. This wasn't just about my dad anymore, this was bigger. Later that afternoon Emma found something in the mail, a thick envelope, no return address. But it was hand-delivered, no stamp, no label. Inside were two things, a letter from Caleb and a flash drive. His letter was rambling, apologetic in parts, desperate in others. He said Dad had gone off the rails, that he was trying to shift the blame to anyone he could, that he pressured Caleb into setting up the fake vendor accounts, that Mom knew more than she let on but never said a word because she was scared of losing everything. He said he didn't want to go down with them, that he was sorry for what happened at the wedding, that he knew I'd never forgive him. But if the flash drive helped balance things out, then maybe one day I'd understand. I plugged it into a throwaway laptop. It was a dump of internal emails, voice memos, spreadsheets and even a few video clips. One of them had Dad on a call with someone overseas laughing about how the kid signs whatever I put in front of him. That was me. Another showed him explaining to Caleb how to split vendor payments into smaller batches to avoid banking thresholds. It was airtight. I sent everything to the IRS contact with a short message. One more gift. That night I sat with Emma on the porch. We didn't say much, just watched the sky darken, the breeze roll in and I realized something. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was removal, a final purge of everything that tried to twist what should have been the best day of my life into a memory of betrayal. Now it was just over, and this time for good.